Imagine watching your own sister count out $20 bills in front of you, then sliding them across the table while saying, "That should be enough for groceries this week." Don't go overboard. Imagine being 37 years old and having to ask permission to buy a cup of coffee. Imagine spending 15 years of your life cleaning, cooking, and caring for people who wouldn't even acknowledge your birthday. Now imagine the day when those same people are standing in front of you, desperate for work, calling you ma'am, and begging for a chance to earn minimum wage cleaning houses. My name is Sarah, and this is exactly what happened to me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning everything changed started like every other morning for the past 15 years. My alarm buzzed at 5 in the morning in the cramped basement room I called home in Portland, Oregon. While normal people my age were waking up in their own apartments, next to partners who loved them, planning their day around careers they'd built and dreams they were chasing, I was stumbling around in the dark, trying not to wake the family upstairs as I prepared for another day of unpaid servitude. My name is Sarah Martinez, and at 37 years old, I was living like a teenager who'd never learned to leave home, except this wasn't my home, and I wasn't a teenager. I was a grown woman with a business degree who'd somehow become the live-in maid, nanny, cook, and general servant for my older sister Linda and her family. The worst part wasn't even the work itself. It was the way they looked at me while I did it, like I was some charity case they were graciously allowing to exist in their space. That Tuesday morning in March felt different from the moment I opened my eyes. Maybe it was the dream I'd had about our parents. Or maybe it was the fact that I'd caught a glimpse of myself in the bathroom mirror the night before, and barely recognized the tired, hollow-eyed woman staring back at me. When had I become this person? When had I stopped fighting for something better? I pulled on the same faded jeans and oversized sweater I wore every day, clothes that had seen better years, much like myself. As I climbed the stairs from the basement to the main floor, I could already hear the familiar sounds of the household beginning to stir. Robert's alarm clock going off upstairs, followed by his heavy footsteps across the bedroom floor. Linda's voice, already sharp and demanding even though she'd just woken up, calling out instructions about coffee and breakfast. The kids moving around in their rooms, probably dropping clothes on floors I'd just cleaned the night before. This house had been my prison for so long that I knew every creak of the floorboards, every trick to getting the temperamental coffee maker to work properly, every hiding spot where the kids stashed their dirty dishes when they didn't want to bring them to the kitchen. I knew that Jessica would want her breakfast sandwich cut diagonally, that Tyler would demand chocolate milk even though he was 16 years old, and that Madison would complain about whatever I packed in her lunchbox. I knew that Robert would grunt his way through breakfast while scrolling through his phone, and that Linda would find at least 3 things to criticize about my morning routine before she'd even had her first cup of coffee. The kitchen was my domain, but only in the sense that I was the one responsible for everything that happened in it. The mortgage on this house was in Linda and Robert's names. The furniture had been chosen by Linda's refined taste and paid for with Robert's steady bank manager salary. The family photos covering the refrigerator and walls showed 3 generations of their happiness, their achievements, their milestones. I existed in this space like a ghost, essential to its functioning but invisible in its story. As I started the coffee and began pulling ingredients for breakfast from the refrigerator, I thought about how I'd ended up here. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. Nothing in life ever is, I suppose, but some temporary situations have a way of becoming permanent before you realize what's happening. 15 years ago, I was Sarah Martinez, recent college graduate with a bachelor's degree in business management and a head full of dreams about starting my own company someday. I had interviews lined up, networking events circled on my calendar, and a 5-year plan that would have made any career counselor proud. Then, our parents died in a car accident on a rainy November evening, and everything changed. Linda had inherited the family house and most of the assets, being the older daughter and the one who was already married with a child. I inherited enough money to get by for a few months, maybe a year if I was careful, but not enough to build a life on. When Linda offered me a place to stay while I got back on my feet, it seemed like the obvious choice. Family helping family, she'd said. Sisters supporting each other through the worst tragedy either of us had ever faced. I'd been so grateful then. Grateful to have somewhere to go, grateful to be around people who understood my grief, grateful to help take care of baby Jessica while Linda and Robert figured out how to manage their expanded responsibilities. It was supposed to be temporary, a few months, maybe 6 at the most, just until I found a good job and could afford my own place. Linda had been so convincing about how much they needed me, how perfect the arrangement would be for everyone involved. What I didn't understand then was how quickly temporary arrangements can become permanent expectations. How helping out around the house could gradually transform into being responsible for the entire household. How a few months could stretch into years, and years could stretch into a decade and a half of my life disappearing into other people's needs and demands. The coffee finished brewing just as Linda appeared in the kitchen, her blonde hair perfectly styled even at 6 in the morning, her silk pajamas probably costing more than I spent on clothes in an entire year. She didn't say good morning. She never said good morning. She just looked around the kitchen with the critical eye of someone inspecting work she was paying for, even though she wasn't paying me a cent. "The coffee smells burned," she said, reaching for her favorite mug from the cabinet. "Did you clean the machine yesterday like I asked you to?" I had cleaned the coffee machine. I cleaned it every day, along with everything else in this house that needed constant attention. "Yes, I cleaned it. Maybe the beans are getting old." "Well, buy new ones when you go shopping today. And make sure you get the good ones this time, not that store-brand garbage." She poured her coffee and took a sip, making a face like she was tasting poison. "Actually, just make a fresh pot. This is undrinkable." 15 years of this. 15 years of criticism disguised as helpful suggestions, of demands presented as polite requests, of being treated like hired help who wasn't even being paid. I dumped the coffee and started over, my hands moving through the familiar motions, while my mind wandered to places it probably shouldn't have gone. What would have happened if I'd said no that first time Linda asked me to stay a little longer? What if I'd insisted on the timeline we'd originally discussed, or demanded some kind of formal arrangement that protected my interests as well as theirs? What if I'd been strong enough, confident enough, brave enough to leave when I first realized I was being taken advantage of? But those were dangerous thoughts, the kind that led to resentment and bitterness, and I'd spent years training myself not to think them. This was my family. This was my home, even if it didn't feel like either most of the time. Linda and Robert had given me shelter when I had nowhere else to go. They'd included me in their children's lives, let me be part of their family structure, provided me with food and a roof over my head for a decade and a half. The least I could do was show some gratitude instead of constantly questioning their motives. Robert appeared in the kitchen next, already dressed in his standard bank uniform of pressed slacks and button-down shirt. He was the kind of man who looked exactly like what he was. A middle manager at a regional bank who'd never had an adventurous thought in his life. Reliable, predictable, and completely convinced that his steady paycheck and conventional lifestyle made him superior to anyone who'd chosen a different path. Or in my case, anyone who'd had their path chosen for them. "Morning, Sarah," he said, not looking up from his phone as he spoke. "Can you make sure my dress shirts get picked up from the dry cleaner today? I'm running low on the white ones." "Of course." I pulled eggs from the refrigerator and started heating the pan for breakfast. "Did you want your usual scrambled eggs this morning?" "Yeah, but not too wet this time." "Linda's right about you needing to pay more attention to details." He finally looked up from his phone, giving me the kind of look a boss might give an underperforming employee. "Also, I need you to stay late tonight to let the cable guy in. They're coming to upgrade our internet, and Linda and I both have evening plans." No asking if I had evening plans. No checking to see if staying late would be convenient for me. Just an assumption that my time belonged to them, that my schedule existed solely to accommodate their needs. This was normal for Robert, who'd never quite grasped the concept that I was a person with my own life rather than a household appliance that happened to be able to talk. The kids started appearing next, each bringing their own special brand of entitlement to the morning routine. Jessica, now 17 and a senior in high school, swept into the kitchen like she was making a grand entrance at a royal ball. She'd inherited Linda's blonde hair and sense of superiority, along with an attitude that made every interaction feel like she was doing you a favor by acknowledging your existence. "Sarah, I need you to wash my black dress today," she announced, not bothering with pleasantries. "I have a date tomorrow night and it has to be perfect. Hand wash only. And make sure you hang it up properly so it doesn't wrinkle. Tyler, 16 and convinced he was God's gift to the world, grabbed a piece of toast from the counter and bit into it while talking. "This bread is stale. Why don't we ever have fresh bread in this house?" "I bought that bread 2 days ago," I said, trying to keep the defensiveness out of my voice. "It should still be fresh." "Well, it's not. Can you go get some good bread today? The kind from that expensive bakery Mom likes?" 14-year-old Madison was the worst of all, probably because she'd never known a world where I wasn't there to cater to her every whim. She'd grown up thinking it was normal to have a live-in servant who would clean up her messes, find her lost homework, and listen to her complain about how unfair her life was. She flopped into a kitchen chair with the dramatic flair only teenagers can master, and immediately launched into her daily list of grievances. "Sarah, my room is too cold. Can you check the heater? And I need you to find my blue sweater. I think it might be in the laundry, but I need it today for the school picture retakes. Oh, and can you make sure there's food I actually like in my lunch today? Yesterday's sandwich was gross." This was my family. These were the people I'd sacrificed my 20s and most of my 30s to serve. I made their breakfast while they complained about everything I did wrong. I listened to their demands while mentally planning my day around their needs. I smiled and nodded and said, "Of course." And, "No problem." While inside, something dark and bitter grew a little larger every day. The morning routine continued like a well-rehearsed play where I was the only actor who didn't know she was performing. Linda criticized the way I'd folded the towels. Robert reminded me to gas up his car before returning it. Jessica decided she didn't want scrambled eggs after all and demanded I make her a smoothie instead. Tyler complained that his orange juice had pulp in it, even though pulp-free orange juice was somehow always more expensive, and I'd been trying to stick to the grocery budget Linda had imposed on me. Madison remembered at the last minute that she needed poster board for a school project due that day. By the time they'd all left for work and school, I was already exhausted, and it wasn't even 8 in the morning yet. The kitchen looked like a tornado had passed through it, which was normal for any morning after the Henderson family had breakfast. Dishes piled in the sink, crumbs covering the counters, coffee rings on the table that Linda would definitely comment on if they were still there when she got home. I stood in the middle of the chaos, looking around at the mess that would take me an hour to clean properly, thinking about the long list of tasks waiting for me throughout the day. Grocery shopping with money that wasn't mine to buy food other people would complain about, laundry that would be criticized no matter how perfectly I folded it, cleaning that would be inspected and found wanting in at least 3 different ways, errands that would be urgent today and forgotten tomorrow. This was my life. This was what I'd chosen, or what had been chosen for me, or what I'd somehow allowed to happen through a combination of grief, gratitude, and gradually diminishing self-respect. I was 37 years old, and I had nothing to show for the last 15 years, except an intimate knowledge of which cleaning products worked best on different types of stains, and an encyclopedic understanding of what each member of the Henderson family needed to be happy on any given day. The worst part wasn't even the work itself. I'd always been organized, always enjoyed taking care of people, always found satisfaction in creating order out of chaos. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Under different circumstances, I might have made an excellent professional housekeeper or personal assistant. The problem was the lack of recognition, respect, or compensation for my efforts. I wasn't an employee with rights and benefits and a salary. I wasn't family who was valued and appreciated for my contributions. I was something in between, something less than both, something that existed in the shadows of other people's lives. I started cleaning the kitchen, my hands moving through motions I'd performed thousands of times before. Load the dishwasher with the plates and glasses. Wash the pans by hand because Linda insisted the dishwasher was too harsh on her good cookware. Wipe down the counters with the specific cleaner Linda preferred, making sure to get into all the corners where crumbs liked to hide. Sweep the floor, mop the floor, clean the coffee machine again, because Linda would definitely check. As I worked, I found myself thinking about the dreams I used to have. Back in college, I'd planned to start my own consulting business. helping small companies improve their organizational systems and operational efficiency. I'd been good at it too. My professors had praised my analytical thinking and attention to detail. My internship supervisors had written glowing recommendations about my ability to identify problems and create practical solutions. What had happened to that ambitious young woman who'd graduated summa cum laude with plans to change the world? Where had she gone? And how had she been replaced by this tired, defeated person who spent her days scrubbing other people's toilets and washing other people's clothes? The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts and pulling me back to the present. It was Linda, calling from her office where she worked as a marketing coordinator for a local advertising firm. She had her own life, her own career, her own identity beyond this house. She got to leave every morning and spend her day with adults who respected her professional opinions and paid her for her time and expertise. "Sarah, I forgot to mention this morning that I need you to pick up my prescription from the pharmacy today. It's the one on Oak Street, not the one by the grocery store. And can you stop by the bank and make that deposit I left on the counter? Robert said it needs to be done before 3. Sure, no problem." I balanced the phone between my ear and shoulder while I continued wiping down the counters. "Anything else? Oh, and my mother is coming for dinner on Friday, so we'll need the good china cleaned and the dining room table polished. You know how she is about everything being perfect." Linda's mother was another story entirely, a woman who'd never worked a day in her life but had opinions about everything, especially about how I ran the household she'd never had to manage herself. She had a talent for finding fault with whatever I'd prepared, no matter how much time and effort I'd put into making everything perfect for her visits. "I'll take care of it," I said, because that's what I always said. "I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. Consider it done." The phrases had become so automatic that I sometimes wondered if I'd forgotten how to say no to anything. "Great. Oh, and Sarah?" Jessica mentioned that her black dress needs to be hand-washed for her date tomorrow. "Make sure you're careful with it. That dress cost more than most people spend on clothes in a month. More than I spent on clothes in a year, actually, since I bought most of my wardrobe from thrift stores and clearance racks." But I didn't say that. I just made a mental note to add dress washing to my growing list of tasks for the day. After Linda hung up, I finished cleaning the kitchen and moved on to the living room, where last night's evidence of family relaxation was scattered across every surface. Robert's newspapers folded wrong and left on the coffee table. Linda's wine glass with lipstick stains on the rim, abandoned on the end table next to her latest romance novel. Jessica's textbooks and notebooks spread across the couch, where she'd been doing homework while watching television. Tyler's video game controllers tangled on the floor next to a bag of chips he'd apparently forgotten to throw away. Madison's art supplies covering the dining room table, along with several failed attempts at whatever project she'd been working on. This was the evidence of their lives, their comfort, their ability to relax in their own home without worrying about who would clean up after them. They could leave messes because they knew I would be there to fix them. They could be careless with their belongings because they knew I would find them, clean them, and put them back where they belonged. They could live without thinking about the maintenance their lifestyle required because someone else was handling all of that invisible work. I picked up each item, cleaned each surface, restored each room to the perfect order Linda expected to find when she came home from work. As I worked, I tried to imagine what it would feel like to come home to a house someone else had cleaned, to eat dinner someone else had prepared, to wear clothes someone else had washed and folded and put away in my closet. What would it feel like to have that kind of support, that kind of invisible assistance, making my life easier every single day? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not just angry, but furious in a way that surprised me with its intensity. When had I gotten so good at suppressing my own feelings that I'd forgotten I was capable of real anger? When had I learned to swallow my resentment so completely that I'd convinced myself I was grateful for the opportunity to serve people who wouldn't cross the street to help me if I needed it? By noon, I'd cleaned the entire downstairs, started 3 loads of laundry, and made Linda's bed with the hospital corners she insisted on but had never learned to do herself. I'd also compiled my mental list of errands for the afternoon: grocery store, pharmacy, bank, dry cleaner, bakery for Tyler's special bread, craft store for Madison's poster board. Each stop would require careful attention to the specific instructions I'd been given, and each one would probably result in additional criticism about something I'd done wrong or forgotten to do perfectly. I made myself a simple lunch from leftovers, eating standing up at the kitchen counter because sitting down for a meal felt too much like relaxation, and relaxation felt too much like something I didn't deserve. As I ate, I stared out the window at the neighborhood where I'd lived for 15 years but never really belonged. Beautiful houses with manicured lawns, where successful families lived successful lives funded by successful careers. I knew the names of most of the neighbors, but only because I'd been introduced as Linda's sister who helps out around the house. Not as Sarah Martinez, business graduate and potential entrepreneur. Not as Sarah Martinez, person with her own dreams and goals and value. Just as Linda's sister, the one who helped out. The afternoon stretched ahead of me like every other afternoon for the past 15 years. Errands and tasks and responsibilities that weren't mine but had somehow become mine anyway. A life that wasn't mine but was the only one I had. A future that looked exactly like the past, stretching endlessly forward without change or growth or possibility. But something was different about this Tuesday afternoon in March. Maybe it was the anger I'd finally allowed myself to feel. Maybe it was the way the sunlight was hitting the kitchen window, reminding me that there was a whole world outside this house where other people were living actual lives. Maybe it was just time. Whatever it was, I could feel something shifting inside me as I gathered my purse and the list of errands and headed out the door. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew something was. Change was in the air, and for the first time in 15 years, I was ready for it. The morning that would change everything started with what seemed like a simple dizzy spell. I was reorganizing the linen closet, a task Linda had decided needed immediate attention because her book club was meeting at the house next week, when the world suddenly tilted sideways. The stack of towels I'd been holding scattered across the hallway floor as I grabbed the door frame to keep from falling. For a moment, I thought it was just fatigue. I'd been up until 2 in the morning the night before, finishing Jessica's elaborate science project because she'd waited until the last minute to tell me it was due. The poster board, research, and detailed charts had taken hours to complete, and I'd barely gotten 4 hours of sleep before my alarm went off for another day of endless tasks. But this felt different. The dizziness came with a strange weakness that seemed to start in my chest and spread through my arms and legs like cold water. My heart was racing, but not from exertion. I'd been feeling tired for weeks, more tired than usual, which was saying something considering my daily routine would exhaust most people half my age. I bent down to collect the scattered towels, and that's when it happened. The world went black around the edges, then completely dark, and the next thing I knew I was lying on the bathroom floor with a sharp pain in my head and something warm and sticky trickling down my face. Blood. I was bleeding from a gash where my head had hit the corner of the sink on my way down. The white bathroom tiles around me were stained red, and for a terrifying moment I couldn't remember where I was or how I'd gotten there. My vision was blurry, and when I tried to sit up, another wave of dizziness washed over me so intensely that I had to lie back down and close my eyes. This wasn't just tiredness. Something was seriously wrong with me, and I was alone in the house with no one to help. Linda and Robert were both at work, the kids were all at school, and I had no idea how long I'd been unconscious on the bathroom floor. It could have been minutes or hours. With shaking hands, I managed to pull my phone from my pocket and call Linda. The phone rang 4 times before she answered, and I could hear the sounds of her office in the background. Laughter, conversation, the normal sounds of people living normal lives in the normal world outside this house. "Sarah, what is it?" "I'm in the middle of a client presentation." Her voice was sharp with annoyance, the way it always was when I interrupted her workday with household matters. "Linda, I think I need help. I fainted and hit my head and I'm bleeding. I think I need to go to the hospital." My voice sounded strange and weak, even to my own ears. There was a pause, and I could hear her covering the phone and saying something to someone else in her office. "Sarah, you're probably just dehydrated. Drink some water and lie down for a while. I can't leave work right now for something like this." Something like this. As if collapsing and bleeding was just another minor inconvenience I was creating for her busy schedule. "Linda, I really think this is serious. I've never fainted before, and the bleeding won't stop. Look, I'm sure you're fine. You're probably just being dramatic." Put some ice on your head and rest for a while. If you're still feeling bad when I get home, we'll talk about it then." The line went dead. My own sister had just dismissed a medical emergency because it interfered with her work presentation. I lay there on the bathroom floor, bleeding and dizzy and completely alone, trying to process what had just happened. The person who was supposed to care about me most in the world had just told me I was being dramatic about a head injury. I called Robert next, hoping he might be more understanding, but he didn't even answer his phone. When I tried calling back, it went straight to voicemail. His voice, professional and distant, informed me that he was unavailable and would return calls at his earliest convenience. No mention of emergencies or urgent situations. No acknowledgement that sometimes people needed help immediately. There was no one else to call. I had no close friends left after 15 years of being too busy with household responsibilities to maintain relationships. I had no other family members in the area. The neighbors barely knew me beyond polite waves when I was taking out trash or bringing in groceries. I was completely on my own. Somehow, I managed to get myself cleaned up enough to drive to the urgent care clinic across town. The bleeding had slowed to a trickle, but I still felt weak and shaky, and the world kept tilting at odd angles when I moved too quickly. Driving probably wasn't the smartest decision I'd ever made, but what choice did I have? The urgent care waiting room was full of people with real problems. A man with a badly cut hand wrapped in bloody towels. A woman holding a crying baby with a fever. An elderly man struggling to breathe properly. I felt foolish sitting among them with my small head wound and vague symptoms, wondering if Linda had been right about me being dramatic. When they finally called my name, the nurse took one look at me and immediately started asking questions about my medical history, my diet, my energy levels, my sleep patterns. She checked my blood pressure 3 times, frowning at the results each time. She drew blood for tests and examined the cut on my head with gentle, professional hands. "When was the last time you had a physical exam?" she asked, cleaning the wound with antiseptic that stung more than I'd expected. I had to think about it. "I don't remember. Maybe 5 years ago. I don't really have time for doctor appointments." She gave me a look that was part concern and part disapproval. "Mrs. Martinez, you need to make time. Your blood pressure is dangerously low, and based on what you've told me about your fatigue in this fainting episode, I suspect you're severely anemic. We'll know more when your blood work comes back, but you need to start taking better care of yourself." The doctor who saw me 20 minutes later confirmed what the nurse had suspected. My iron levels were critically low, probably from years of poor nutrition and chronic stress. My blood pressure was so low that he was surprised I'd been functioning at all. The fainting episode was my body's way of telling me that it couldn't continue running on empty. "You need immediate treatment," he said, looking at my test results with a concerned expression. "Iron supplements, dietary changes, and most importantly, rest. Your body is completely depleted. You're going to need to take it easy for the next few weeks while we get your levels back to normal." Rest. The word sounded foreign to me. When was the last time I'd rested? Really rested? Not just collapsed into bed exhausted at the end of another 18-hour day of serving other people's needs? I couldn't remember. I can prescribe iron supplements, but they're not going to work if you don't address the underlying issues causing this depletion. You need to eat better, sleep more, and reduce your stress levels significantly. He handed me a prescription and a stack of informational brochures about anemia and self-care. "Do you have someone at home who can help you with household responsibilities while you recover?" I almost laughed. Someone to help me with household responsibilities? The household responsibilities were mine precisely because there was no one else who would do them. Linda and Robert and the kids had arranged their entire lives around the assumption that I would take care of everything they didn't want to deal with themselves. "I'll figure something out," I said, which was what I always said when faced with impossible situations. The bill for the urgent care visit was $412. $412 that I didn't have. For medical care I wouldn't have needed if the people I'd spent 15 years serving had shown even basic concern for my well-being. I put it on the credit card I used for emergencies, the one with the high interest rate that I'd been trying to pay off for 3 years. When I got home, Linda's car was already in the driveway. She was in the kitchen making herself a snack, still dressed in her work clothes, looking fresh and energetic after her day at the office. She glanced up when I walked in, taking in my pale complexion and the bandage on my forehead. "Oh, good, you're back. How was your little medical adventure?" Her tone suggested she thought the whole thing had been an overreaction on my part. "The doctor said I'm severely anemic and my blood pressure is dangerously low. I need rest and better nutrition, and I have to take iron supplements." I showed her the prescription and the educational materials the doctor had given me. Linda skimmed the paperwork with the same expression she used when reviewing household bills she didn't want to pay. "Well, I'm sure you'll be fine once you start taking care of yourself better. Maybe eat more vegetables instead of just picking at leftovers all the time." The irony was stunning. I ate leftovers because I prepared elaborate meals for the family and then survived on whatever scraps remained. I picked at food because I was too busy serving everyone else to sit down for proper meals. I was malnourished because I'd spent 15 years making sure everyone else in the house was well fed while barely taking care of my own basic needs. The doctor said I need to rest for a few weeks while my iron levels recover. I'm going to need help with some of the household tasks. I held my breath, waiting for her response. "Help with household tasks?" Linda's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose in surprise. "Sarah, I can't just take time off work to do housework. Robert and I both have demanding careers. That's why we need you to handle the domestic stuff." "I'm not asking you to take time off work. I'm asking for help managing the workload while I recover from a medical condition that was caused by overwork and stress." "Caused by overwork?" Linda's voice took on the sharp edge it always got when she felt criticized. "Sarah, you live here rent-free. You don't have the pressures of a real job or real responsibilities. How is that overwork? Real job, real responsibilities. As if managing every aspect of their household wasn't real work. As if caring for their children, maintaining their home, and organizing their lives wasn't real responsibility. As if the fact that I wasn't paid for my labor somehow made it less valuable or demanding. Linda, I work 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, without pay, without benefits, without vacation time, and without any recognition for what I do. If you hired someone to do everything I do for this family, it would cost you at least $60,000 a year." She stared at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. "That's ridiculous. You're not doing anything that complicated. Basic housework and childcare isn't the same as a real career. Then you do it for a few weeks while I recover." The silence that followed was deafening. Linda set down her snack and crossed her arms, her expression shifting from surprise to something that looked almost like panic. For the first time in 15 years, she was being asked to take responsibility for the household she'd been happy to ignore as long as someone else was managing it. "That's not fair, Sarah. You know I don't have time for that kind of thing. My job is demanding, and Robert's career is at a critical stage right now. We can't just drop everything to do housework. And I can't continue doing everything while I'm recovering from a medical condition that was caused by doing everything for the past 15 years. Robert chose that moment to walk through the front door, loosening his tie as he headed toward the kitchen. He stopped short when he saw us facing off across the kitchen island, clearly sensing the tension in the air. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between Linda and me with the wary expression of someone who'd walked into the middle of an argument. "Sarah fainted today and went to the doctor," Linda said, her voice taking on the tone she used when explaining other people's problems. "Now she wants us to do housework while she recovers." The way she said it made my medical emergency sound like a minor inconvenience, and my request for help sound like an unreasonable demand. Robert's expression shifted from concern to irritation in a matter of seconds. "Sarah, we've all had health scares. That's what being an adult means. You deal with your problems and keep up with your responsibilities." He opened the refrigerator and looked inside, frowning when he didn't immediately see whatever he was looking for. "Speaking of responsibilities, what's for dinner?" "I'm starving." I stared at him, this man who'd just walked into a conversation about my collapsing from exhaustion, and immediately demanded to know what I was cooking for his dinner. The man who'd ignored my phone calls when I was bleeding on the bathroom floor was now upset that his evening meal might be delayed. "I haven't started dinner yet," I said quietly. "I was at the urgent care clinic getting medical treatment." "Well, you're home now," he said, as if that solved everything. "The kids will be hungry when they get back from their after-school activities." The kids? As if on cue, the front door slammed open and Tyler burst into the kitchen, his backpack hitting the floor with a thud that would have earned me a lecture if I'd been the one making the noise. "I'm starving," he announced, echoing his father's priorities. "What's for dinner? And why does the house smell weird?" The house smelled like the antiseptic from the urgent care clinic, which was still on my clothes and hair. It smelled like medical emergency and fear, and the realization that I was completely on my own in a house full of people who were supposed to care about me. "Sarah had a little health issue today," Linda explained, using the same dismissive tone she'd used with Robert. "She's feeling better now, so dinner should be ready soon." Tyler shrugged, already losing interest in anything that didn't directly affect him. "Cool. Can we have those pasta things I like? And garlic bread." I told some friends they could come over later to work on our group project. Friends coming over meant additional meals to prepare, additional mess to clean up, and additional pressure to make sure the house looked perfect for visitors. On a normal day, this kind of last-minute announcement would have sent me into overdrive, planning menus and cleaning schedules to accommodate unexpected guests. Today, I just stared at him, this 16-year-old boy who'd just casually added more work to my day without asking if I was capable of handling it. Who'd made assumptions about my availability and energy without any consideration for what I might need or want? "I can't make dinner tonight," I said, the words coming out before I'd fully decided to say them. "I need to rest." The kitchen went silent. Linda, Robert, and Tyler all stared at me like I'd just announced I was planning to burn the house down. In 15 years, I had never refused to make dinner. I had cooked meals while running fever, while dealing with food poisoning, while exhausted from days of nonstop work. I had never, not once, said no to any request or demand from any member of this family. "What do you mean you can't make dinner?" Linda's voice was sharp with disbelief. "Sarah, we need to eat." "Then eat," I said simply. "There's food in the refrigerator. There are restaurants in town. There are grocery stores that sell prepared meals. There are many options for feeding yourselves that don't require my labor." Robert's face was turning red, a sure sign that his temper was rising. "Sarah, this is ridiculous." "You're acting like you're dying or something." "It was just a fainting spell. People faint all the time." "People don't faint from being healthy and well-rested," I replied. "People faint when their bodies are pushed beyond their limits for extended periods of time." The doctor was very clear about what caused this and what I need to do to recover. "Well, what are we supposed to do for dinner?" Tyler demanded, as if this was the most pressing crisis he'd ever faced. "I already told my friends we'd have food here. Figure it out," I said, and then I walked out of the kitchen. I could hear them behind me, their voices rising in a mixture of outrage and panic. Linda calling after me, demanding that I come back and be reasonable. Robert muttering about dramatic women and their health problems. Tyler complaining loudly about how unfair it was that his plans were being ruined. I went down to my basement room and closed the door, something I'd never done during the dinner hour in 15 years of living in this house. I could hear them moving around upstairs, opening cabinets and closing them, voices getting louder as they realized they had no idea how to feed themselves without my assistance. For the first time in years, I lay down in the middle of the day. Not because I'd finished all my tasks and earned a break, but because my body needed rest, and I was finally ready to give it what it needed instead of what other people demanded from it. The iron supplements the doctor had prescribed were sitting on my nightstand, along with a pamphlet about recognizing the signs of chronic stress and exhaustion. I read through the symptoms list, checking off item after item. Fatigue, difficulty concentrating, frequent illness, changes in appetite, sleep disturbances, irritability, feelings of helplessness. I had every single symptom on the list. According to the medical literature, I'd been living in a state of chronic stress for so long that my body had stopped functioning properly. My immune system was compromised, my nutritional needs weren't being met, and my nervous system was constantly in fight-or-flight mode. I was a textbook case of someone who'd sacrificed their health for other people's comfort. Upstairs, I could hear the sounds of the family attempting to prepare their own meal. Cabinets slamming, voices arguing about who was supposed to do what. The microwave beeping repeatedly as they heated up whatever they'd managed to find. At one point, someone burned something badly enough to set off the smoke alarm, and I listened to the chaos of them trying to air out the kitchen while continuing to complain about the situation. Part of me wanted to go upstairs and fix everything, the way I always did, to smooth over the conflict, prepare a proper meal, and restore the peaceful order they'd come to expect. That would have been the easy thing to do, the familiar thing, the thing that would make everyone happy except me. Instead, I stayed in my room and took my first iron supplement, washing it down with the water bottle I'd brought down from the kitchen. I read through the nutritional information the doctor had given me, learning about foods that would help restore my depleted system. I made a mental list of changes I needed to make, not just for my physical health but for my overall well-being. At 8 o'clock, Linda knocked on my door. When I didn't immediately answer, she opened it and peered inside, her expression a mixture of concern and frustration. "Sarah, the kids are hungry. Tyler's friends came over and there's nothing proper to feed them. You need to come upstairs and make something decent for dinner." "No," I said, not moving from my position lying down on the bed. "I told you I need to rest tonight." The doctor was very specific about that. The doctor probably meant you should take it easy, not completely abandon your responsibilities. Linda stepped into the room, her voice taking on the tone she used when trying to convince me to do things I didn't want to do. "Just something simple. Pasta and salad. It won't take you long." "Linda, if it won't take long and it's so simple, why can't you make it yourself?" She stared at me like I'd asked her to perform brain surgery. "I don't cook, Sarah. You know that. I've never been good at domestic stuff. That's why it works so well having you handle all of that." "It works well for you," I corrected. "It doesn't work well for me. In fact, it's literally making me sick." "You're being dramatic again." But there was uncertainty in her voice now, as if she was starting to realize that this conversation was different from all the ones we'd had before. "Look, I'll order pizza for tonight, but tomorrow you need to be back to normal. The kids have school, Robert has that important meeting, and I have deadlines at work. We can't function without you keeping everything organized. Then maybe you need to learn how to function differently." She left my room without another word, but I could hear her footsteps on the stairs, heavier than usual, as if the weight of actual responsibility was already wearing her down. 20 minutes later, I heard the doorbell ring and the sound of pizza delivery being distributed upstairs. Voices were more subdued now, as if the reality of having to pay for prepared food instead of expecting me to create meals from scratch was sinking in. By 9 o'clock, the house was quieter than usual, and I suspected the cleanup from their improvised dinner was going less smoothly than they'd anticipated. I fell asleep early that night, something I hadn't done in years. Real sleep, not the exhausted collapse I usually experienced after 18-hour days of nonstop work. When I woke up the next morning, I felt different. Not physically yet, since the iron supplements would take weeks to restore my depleted system, but mentally. For the first time in 15 years, I'd put my own needs first, and the world hadn't ended. The family had survived one evening without my constant service. They'd fed themselves, cleaned up their own mess, and managed their own evening routine. It hadn't been smooth or efficient, but they'd done it, which proved they were capable of more than they'd let me believe for the past decade and a half. As I lay in bed listening to the sounds of the house waking up around me, I realized something important had shifted during those few hours of saying no. I'd discovered that their needs weren't more important than mine, that their comfort wasn't worth my health, and that their convenience wasn't a reasonable trade for my well-being. For 15 years, I'd been operating under the assumption that I owed them something. Gratitude for taking me in. Service in exchange for room and board. Constant availability in return for being included in their family. But lying there in the quiet morning light, I began to understand that I'd already paid any debt I might have owed, many times over. The person I needed to start taking care of was me. And if that made life more difficult for the people who'd been taking advantage of my labor for the past 15 years, well, that sounded like their problem to solve, not mine. The next morning arrived with the familiar sounds of chaos from upstairs, but this time I didn't leap out of bed at the first sign of movement. Instead, I lay there listening to the Henderson family attempting to manage their morning routine without my orchestration, and the results were both predictable and enlightening. Robert's voice carried down through the floorboards, sharp with irritation. "Linda, where's my blue tie? The one I always wear for Thursday presentations?" "How should I know where your tie is?" Linda's response was equally sharp. "Sarah always handles your wardrobe organization. Well, Sarah's not doing it this morning, is she? So I guess you'll have to figure it out. The sound of drawers being yanked open and slammed shut echoed through the house, followed by Jessica's voice joining the morning's symphony of complaints. Mom, I can't find my chemistry textbook anywhere. Sarah always knows where everything is. Where is she? She's having some kind of health crisis, Linda replied, her tone suggesting that my medical emergency was an inconvenience she was personally victimized by. Just look for your book yourself. It has to be somewhere. But I looked everywhere. Sarah always finds my stuff when I can't. This is so unfair. I have a test today, and if I don't have my book, I'm going to fail. Tyler's voice added to the cacophony from somewhere near the kitchen. There's no breakfast ready. What are we supposed to eat? I can't function without proper nutrition. The irony of Tyler complaining about nutrition wasn't lost on me, considering he usually survived on energy drinks and whatever processed snacks he could grab between video game sessions. But apparently, when I wasn't there to provide elaborate breakfast spreads, the concept of preparing his own food became an insurmountable challenge. Make yourself some cereal, Robert called from upstairs, his voice muffled as if he was searching through closets. Or toast. It's not rocket science. We don't have any good cereal, Tyler shot back. Sarah always buys the kind I like. All we have is Mom's weird health stuff that tastes like cardboard. Then eat the cardboard cereal, Linda snapped. I don't have time to go grocery shopping before work. Madison's voice joined the chorus of complaints, shrill with the particular brand of outrage only a 14-year-old can achieve. My uniform shirts aren't clean. Sarah always has them ready for me. What am I supposed to wear to school? Wear yesterday's shirt, Linda called down the stairs. One day of wearing the same shirt won't kill you. Gross! I can't wear dirty clothes to school. Everyone will notice. This is all Sarah's fault for being sick at the most inconvenient time. All Sarah's fault. Even my medical emergency was somehow my fault, my inconsiderate timing disrupting their carefully managed lives. I lay in my basement room, listening to them struggle with tasks I'd been handling seamlessly for 15 years, and felt something that might have been satisfaction if it wasn't mixed with so much sadness. This was my family. These were the people I'd sacrificed everything for, and their response to my health crisis was anger that it interfered with their comfort. Not one of them had asked how I was feeling this morning. Not one had offered to help with anything. Their only concern was how my absence affected their personal convenience. I eventually got up and went through my own simplified morning routine, moving slowly and deliberately in a way I hadn't done in years. Usually my mornings were a frantic rush to get everyone else ready before taking care of my own basic needs. Today, I took time to shower properly, to choose clothes I actually liked wearing, to eat a real breakfast instead of grabbing leftover scraps while cleaning up after everyone else. When I finally emerged from the basement, the kitchen looked like a tornado had passed through it. Cereal boxes stood open on the counter, their contents scattered across the surface. Milk had been spilled and not cleaned up, creating a sticky puddle that was already attracting flies. Dirty dishes filled the sink and covered every available counter space. Someone had attempted to make toast and burned it badly enough that the smoke alarm had gone off, evidenced by the fact that the windows were still open and a fan was running to clear the air. Linda was standing in the middle of the chaos, dressed for work but looking frazzled in a way I'd never seen before. Her usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled, and there was a stain on her blouse that she'd apparently given up trying to remove. Sarah, thank God you're up, she said when she saw me, relief flooding her voice. This morning has been an absolute disaster. The kids couldn't find anything they needed, Robert's having a meltdown about his presentation clothes, and I'm going to be late for work if this takes much longer. She gestured around the destroyed kitchen as if the mess was some natural disaster that had occurred spontaneously, rather than the predictable result of 4 people attempting to feed themselves without any organizational skills or consideration for cleanup. I can see that, I said, surveying the damage. What exactly would you like me to do about it? The question seemed to catch her off guard. She stared at me for a moment, as if I'd asked something completely nonsensical. Well, clean it up, obviously, and help everyone find what they need. And figure out what we're going to do about breakfast tomorrow because this can't happen again. Actually, it can happen again, I said calmly. And it will, unless you all learn to take care of yourselves, instead of expecting me to manage every aspect of your lives. Linda's expression shifted from relief to frustration faster than I'd thought possible. Sarah, I don't have time for this philosophical discussion about household responsibilities. I have a job to get to, and so does Robert. The kids have school. We need you to handle the domestic stuff so we can focus on our real responsibilities. Real responsibilities. There was that phrase again, the one that dismissed everything I did as somehow less important than their paid work and educational pursuits. As if creating and maintaining the entire foundation that allowed their real responsibilities to exist wasn't work that mattered. My health is a real responsibility too, I replied. And the doctor was very clear that I need to reduce my stress and workload while I recover. That means you're going to have to handle some of the domestic stuff yourselves. For how long? The question came out sharper than she'd probably intended, revealing that her concern wasn't for my well-being but for how long she'd be inconvenienced by my medical needs. For as long as it takes me to get healthy again. Could be weeks, could be months. The doctor said chronic exhaustion like mine doesn't recover overnight. Linda's face went pale. Months? Sarah, that's not possible. We can't function like this for months. Look at this morning. It was complete chaos. Then you'll need to learn to function differently. Robert appeared in the kitchen doorway, adjusting a tie that was clearly the wrong color for his outfit, but apparently the only one he'd been able to locate. His hair was slightly messed up, and there was toothpaste on his collar, small signs that his normally precise morning routine had been disrupted. Sarah, I need you to iron 3 shirts for me tonight, he said without preamble. I have important meetings the rest of this week, and I can't show up looking unprofessional. I won't be ironing your shirts, I said simply. He stopped adjusting his tie and looked at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. What do you mean you won't be ironing my shirts? I mean exactly what I said. I won't be ironing your shirts tonight, or any other night, while I'm recovering from a medical condition that was caused by overwork. Sarah, that's ridiculous. Ironing a few shirts isn't going to kill you. You're right. Ironing a few shirts won't kill me. But 15 years of ironing shirts, cooking meals, cleaning house, doing laundry, organizing schedules, managing finances, caring for children, and handling every other domestic task while being told that none of it constitutes real work has nearly killed me, literally. The doctor said if I don't make immediate changes, my health will continue to deteriorate. Robert's face was turning the familiar red color that signaled his rising temper. So what are you saying? That you're just going to stop doing anything around here? That you're going to freeload while the rest of us work to support this household? Freeload. The word hit me like a physical blow. After 15 years of unpaid labor, after sacrificing my career and independence to serve their family's needs, after working 18-hour days without compensation or recognition, he was accusing me of freeloading. Robert, if you hired someone to do everything I do for this family, you'd pay them at least $60,000 a year. I've been doing it for free. If anyone's been freeloading, it's all of you. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of the fans still running to clear the breakfast disaster. Linda and Robert stared at me with expressions of shock and something that might have been fear. In 15 years, I had never challenged their authority, never questioned their treatment of me, never demanded anything for myself. Jessica chose that moment to storm into the kitchen, her school bag slung over her shoulder and her face set in the expression of righteous indignation she'd inherited from her mother. I'm going to be late for school because I can't find anything I need, she announced, as if this was a crisis of national importance. Sarah, you need to help me get organized before I leave. No, I said. It was such a simple word, but it seemed to echo through the kitchen like a gunshot. Jessica's mouth fell open, and she looked between her parents and me, as if waiting for someone to explain why the natural order of the universe had suddenly shifted. What do you mean, no? She demanded. I mean no. I will not help you get organized. You're 17 years old. You're perfectly capable of organizing your own belongings and managing your own schedule, but you always help me find my stuff. That's what you do. What I do is enable you to be irresponsible by constantly fixing the problems you create for yourself. I won't be doing that anymore. Jessica's face crumpled into the expression she used when she wanted to manipulate adults into giving her what she wanted. But Sarah, I really need your help. I have so much going on with school and college applications. I don't have time to keep track of every little thing. Then you'll need to learn time management skills, won't you? The conversation was interrupted by Tyler thundering down the stairs, his backpack bouncing against his back and his face flushed with annoyance. "The washing machine is making weird noises," he announced. "I think it's broken. Sarah, you need to fix it." "I'm not a washing machine repair technician," I replied. "If it's broken, you'll need to call a professional. But you always fix it when it makes weird noises. You know how to make it work properly. I know how to redistribute unbalanced loads and clean lint filters. Basic maintenance that anyone can learn to do. If the machine is actually broken, it needs professional repair." Tyler stared at me as if I'd suggested he learn to fly. "So what am I supposed to do about my laundry? Learn to do it yourself. Or take it to a laundromat. Or wear dirty clothes. Those are your options." Madison appeared last, as usual, trailing the dramatic energy that seemed to follow her everywhere. She took one look at the destroyed kitchen and the tense faces of her family members, and immediately launched into her own list of grievances. "The house is a disaster, nobody made me lunch, and I can't find my science homework anywhere. Sarah, you need to fix all of this before I leave for school." "No, I don't." Madison's face went through a series of expressions as she processed this unprecedented response. Confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally a calculating look that suggested she was trying to figure out what strategy would be most effective for getting what she wanted. "Sarah, if you don't help me, I'm going to fail science class." "Do you want me to fail science class?" "Madison, your academic success is your responsibility, not mine. If you can't find your homework, that's a consequence of not being organized. If you don't have lunch, that's a consequence of not preparing one. These are your problems to solve. That's not fair. You're supposed to help me with stuff like this. I'm supposed to help you learn to be independent and responsible. Doing everything for you doesn't help you. It hurts you." The room erupted into overlapping voices as all 4 family members began talking at once, their voices rising in volume and intensity as they competed to express their outrage and disbelief. Linda demanding that I stop being unreasonable. Robert insisting that I was abandoning my responsibilities. Jessica complaining that her entire day was ruined. Tyler arguing that he shouldn't have to learn to do laundry because that's what I was there for. Madison launching into a dramatic monologue about how unfair life was. I stood in the middle of their chaos, listening to them reveal exactly how they saw me and what they expected from me, and felt something shift inside me that I'd never felt before. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that. Not just resentment, though 15 years of that was finally bubbling to the surface. It was clarity. Crystal clear understanding of what my life had become and what it would continue to be if I didn't change it. They weren't arguing with me because they were concerned about my health or well-being. They weren't upset because they cared about my happiness or future. They were angry because their personal servant had suddenly announced she was going on strike, and they had no idea how to function without someone to clean up their messes and organize their lives. "Stop," I said, my voice cutting through their overlapping complaints. "Everyone stop talking." The kitchen fell silent again, probably because none of them had ever heard me speak with that tone of authority before. I want all of you to listen very carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. For 15 years, I have managed every aspect of this household while you've treated me like hired help you don't have to pay. I have cooked your meals, cleaned your messes, organized your schedules, done your laundry, found your lost belongings, and solved your problems while receiving no compensation, no appreciation, and no respect in return. I looked around the room, making eye contact with each of them in turn. Yesterday, I collapsed from exhaustion and had to take myself to the hospital because none of you could be bothered to help me when I was injured and bleeding. The doctor told me that I'm severely ill from chronic stress and overwork, and that if I don't make immediate changes, my health will continue to deteriorate. Linda opened her mouth to interrupt, but I held up my hand to stop her. I'm not finished. From now on, I will not be doing any household tasks while I recover from this medical condition. You are all adults, or nearly adults, and you are perfectly capable of taking care of yourselves. You can cook your own meals, clean your own messes, do your own laundry, and solve your own problems. Sarah, that's completely unreasonable, Robert started to say. What's unreasonable is expecting one person to work 18 hours a day without pay while being told that her work isn't real and doesn't matter. What's unreasonable is dismissing someone's medical emergency because it interferes with your convenience. What's unreasonable is taking 15 years of someone's life and giving nothing in return except criticism and demands for more. I moved toward the kitchen door but turned back to face them one more time. I'll be in my room resting, as my doctor instructed. When you've figured out how to function like responsible adults, let me know. Until then, you're on your own. I left them standing in their destroyed kitchen, their voices rising again in a mixture of outrage and panic as they realized I was serious. For the first time in 15 years, I walked away from their problems and made their chaos their own responsibility to solve. Back in my basement room, I could hear them moving around upstairs, their footsteps heavier and more frantic than usual as they tried to manage tasks they'd never had to think about before. Cabinets opening and closing as they searched for things I'd always found for them. The vacuum cleaners starting and stopping repeatedly as someone tried to figure out how to use it properly. The washing machine buzzing with an off-balance load that no one knew how to fix. I lay on my bed with my medical information spread out around me, reading about recovery from chronic exhaustion and malnutrition. The materials emphasize the importance of rest, stress reduction, and proper nutrition. They also mentioned that people in my condition often needed to make significant life changes to prevent recurring health problems. Significant life changes. The phrase echoed in my mind as I listened to the sounds of my family struggling to manage their own lives without my constant assistance. What kind of life changes was I willing to make? How far was I prepared to go to protect my health and reclaim my independence? The iron supplements were already making me feel slightly better, though the doctor had warned it would take weeks to see significant improvement. But even this small increase in energy was enough to help me think more clearly than I had in years. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't spending every moment of my day focused on other people's needs and demands. I had space in my mind to think about what I wanted, what I needed, and what kind of future I wanted to build for myself. The future I'd been living wasn't really a future at all. Errands and tasks and responsibilities that weren't mine but had somehow become mine anyway. A life that wasn't mine but was the only one I had. A future that looked exactly like the past, stretching endlessly forward without change or growth or possibility. But something was different about this Tuesday afternoon in March. Maybe it was the anger I'd finally allowed myself to feel. Maybe it was the way the sunlight was hitting the kitchen window, reminding me that there was a whole world outside this house where other people were living actual lives. Maybe it was just time. Whatever it was, I could feel something shifting inside me as I gathered my purse and the list of errands and headed out the door. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew something was. Change was in the air, and for the first time in 15 years, I was ready for it. The morning that would change everything started with what seemed like a simple dizzy spell. I was reorganizing the linen closet, a task Linda had decided needed immediate attention because her book club was meeting at the house next week, when the world suddenly tilted sideways. The stack of towels I'd been holding scattered across the hallway floor as I grabbed the door frame to keep from falling. For a moment, I thought it was just fatigue. I'd been up until 2 in the morning the night before, finishing Jessica's elaborate science project because she'd waited until the last minute to tell me it was due. The poster board, research, and detailed charts had taken hours to complete, and I'd barely gotten 4 hours of sleep before my alarm went off for another day of endless tasks. But this felt different. The dizziness came with a strange weakness that seemed to start in my chest and spread through my arms and legs like cold water. My heart was racing, but not from exertion. I'd been feeling tired for weeks, more tired than usual, which was saying something considering my daily routine would exhaust most people half my age. I bent down to collect the scattered towels, and that's when it happened. The world went black around the edges, then completely dark, and the next thing I knew I was lying on the bathroom floor with a sharp pain in my head and something warm and sticky trickling down my face, blood. I was bleeding from a gash where my head had hit the corner of the sink on my way down. The white bathroom tiles around me were stained red, and for a terrifying moment I couldn't remember where I was or how I'd gotten there. My vision was blurry, and when I tried to sit up, Another wave of dizziness washed over me so intensely that I had to lie back down and close my eyes. This wasn't just tiredness. Something was seriously wrong with me, and I was alone in the house with no one to help. Linda and Robert were both at work, the kids were all at school, and I had no idea how long I'd been unconscious on the bathroom floor. It could have been minutes or hours. With shaking hands, I managed to pull my phone from my pocket and call Linda. The phone rang 4 times before she answered, and I could hear the sounds of her office in the background. Laughter, conversation, the normal sounds of people living normal lives in the normal world outside this house. "Sarah, what is it?" "I'm in the middle of a client presentation." Her voice was sharp with annoyance, the way it always was when I interrupted her workday with household matters. Jessica had a complete meltdown because she couldn't find her college application materials, and Madison forgot her lunch money and had to call me at work to bring her food. I pulled out ingredients for a simple sandwich, listening to her recitation of the day's disasters with something that felt almost like amusement. These were all problems I'd been solving seamlessly for years, invisible work that had suddenly become visible the moment I stopped doing it. "It sounds like everyone learned some valuable lessons about personal responsibility today," I said, assembling my sandwich with deliberate calm. "Personal responsibility?" Linda's voice rose in pitch. "Sarah, they're children. They need guidance and support, not to be thrown into the deep end without any help. Jessica is 17 and about to go to college. Tyler is 16 and has his driver's license. Madison is 14 and perfectly capable of keeping track of her own lunch money. These aren't children, Linda. These are young adults who've been enabled to act like children because someone has always been there to fix their mistakes. And what about Robert and me? We have demanding careers. We can't be expected to handle all the domestic responsibilities on top of our professional obligations. Then hire someone to handle the domestic responsibilities. Pay them a fair wage, give them benefits, treat them with respect, and acknowledge the value of their work. Just don't expect me to continue doing it for free while being told it doesn't matter." Linda stared at me as if I'd suggested something completely unreasonable. "Hire someone? Sarah, do you have any idea how much professional housekeeping and childcare costs? We'd have to pay thousands of dollars a month for the level of service you provide." "Exactly. Thousands of dollars a month, that's the value of the work I've been doing for free for 15 years, work you've told me repeatedly isn't real and doesn't matter." The silence that followed was filled with the sound of the dishwasher running a load that someone had apparently figured out how to start, though I could hear dishes rattling around in a way that suggested they hadn't been loaded properly. "So what are you saying?" Linda asked finally. "That you want us to pay you thousands of dollars a month to continue doing what you've always done?" "I'm saying that I want you to recognize the value of domestic work and treat the person doing it with respect. Whether that person is me or someone you hire is up to you. And if we can't afford to hire someone, then you'll need to learn to do the work yourselves. Millions of people manage to maintain households without live-in servants. I'm sure you'll figure it out." I finished making my sandwich and headed back toward the basement, leaving Linda sitting alone with her laptop and the debris of her family's failed attempts at self-sufficiency. I could feel her watching me go, probably hoping I'd turn around and offer to help clean up the mess, to solve the problems, to make everything go back to the way it had been before. But I kept walking. The person who would have turned around and fixed everything for them was gone, and she wasn't coming back. In her place was someone who understood her own worth and wouldn't accept anything less than the treatment she deserved. It was going to be an interesting few weeks. 3 weeks of chaos later, Linda finally broke. I was sitting in my basement room, researching online courses to update my business skills, when she knocked on my door with the tentative tap of someone who was no longer sure of their welcome. When I opened it, she looked like she'd aged 5 years in the span of less than a month. Her usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, her blonde hair showing dark roots she'd never let grow out before, and there were stress lines around her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. Behind her, I could hear the sounds of yet another household disaster in progress upstairs. Something that sounded like Tyler arguing with Robert about whose turn it was to do laundry, while Jessica's voice carried from the kitchen, complaining loudly about the lack of decent food in the house. "Sarah, we need to talk," Linda said, her voice lacking the authoritative tone she'd used with me for 15 years. "This isn't working. The house is falling apart, nobody knows how to do anything properly, and we're spending a fortune on takeout and emergency repairs." "That sounds like a difficult situation," I replied, not moving from my doorway to invite her in. "It is a difficult situation. Robert is furious about the mess, the kids are constantly complaining, and I'm exhausted from trying to manage everything on top of my job." She paused, looking around my room as if seeing it for the first time. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the value of domestic work and treating people with respect." I waited, curious to see where this conversation was heading. "I realize now that maybe we took you for granted. Maybe we didn't fully appreciate everything you did to keep this household running smoothly." The words came out slowly, as if she was having trouble forming them. "And maybe we could work out some kind of arrangement that would be fairer to everyone involved." "What kind of arrangement?" Linda shifted uncomfortably. "Well, what if we paid you something? For the household management? Not a huge amount, because we're family and you do live here rent-free, but something to show that we value your contributions." "How much were you thinking? Maybe $500 a month? That's more than most people get for allowances, and it would give you some spending money of your own." $500 a month for 18 hours a day of skilled labor managing a 5-person household. I almost laughed, but the expression on her face told me she was serious. She genuinely thought $500 was generous compensation for work that would cost them thousands if they hired professionals. "Linda, I've been doing some research while I've been recovering. Professional house managers in Portland make between $4,000 and $6,000 a month, plus benefits. Live-in childcare providers make similar amounts. Personal chefs, housekeepers, laundry services, all of these are expensive because they require skill and time." Her face went pale. "4,000 to $6,000? That's impossible. We don't have that kind of money." "Then you can't afford the level of service I've been providing. Which means you'll need to either learn to do it yourselves or significantly reduce your expectations about how your household should function." "But Sarah, this is your home too. You benefit from having a clean, organized house and good meals. It's not like you'd be doing this work purely for our benefit." "This isn't my home, Linda. This is your house where you've allowed me to live in the basement while I worked as your unpaid servant for 15 years. There's a significant difference." The sound of something crashing came from upstairs, followed by colorful language from Robert and Tyler. Linda winced, clearly recognizing that another household crisis was developing that would require her attention. "I can't keep doing this," she said, and for the first time in our conversation, she sounded genuinely desperate. "I can't manage my job and all of this domestic stuff. I'm failing at everything." "Then make different choices," I said simply. "Hire help you can afford to pay properly, or reduce your lifestyle to match what you can maintain yourselves, or learn the skills you need to function independently. But don't expect me to solve your problems for free anymore." She left without another word, her footsteps heavy on the stairs as she went up to deal with whatever new disaster was unfolding in her formerly perfect house. I could hear her voice getting sharp with stress as she tried to mediate between Robert and Tyler, neither of whom seemed interested in taking responsibility for whatever they'd broken. That evening, Robert appeared at my door, his approach more direct than Linda's had been. He didn't knock or wait for permission. He just walked into my room like he owned it, which technically he did, though his ownership of the house didn't give him ownership of me. "Sarah, this has gone on long enough," he said, his voice carrying the authority he was used to wielding at the bank. "I understand you are upset about your health situation, but you've made your point. It's time to get back to normal." "This is normal," I replied, looking up from the laptop where I'd been working on my resume. "This is what normal looks like when you don't have an unpaid servant managing your entire life. You're not a servant, and you know it. You're family. Family helps each other out." "Family helps each other out," I agreed. "But for 15 years, the help has only flowed in one direction. I've helped all of you with everything while receiving no help in return. That's not family. That's exploitation." Robert's face was turning the familiar red that signaled his rising temper. "Exploitation? Sarah, we've given you a place to live, food to eat, and included you in our family for 15 years. How is that exploitation? You've given me a basement room and leftover food in exchange for full-time household management, childcare, cooking, cleaning, laundry, and personal assistant services. If you calculated the value of my labor at minimum wage, you'd owe me over $400,000 in back pay. That's ridiculous. You can't put a price on family relationships. You're right, family relationships are priceless. But employment relationships have specific values, and that's what we've had here. I've been your employee, not your family member, and you've never treated me like family. We absolutely have treated you like family. Robert, when was the last time you asked about my hopes and dreams? When did you last celebrate my birthday or acknowledge my achievements? When have you ever considered my needs when making family decisions? Family members care about each other's well-being. Employers just care about getting their work done. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again, apparently unable to come up with examples of times when they'd treated me like a valued family member, rather than a convenient employee. Look, Sarah, maybe we haven't been perfect, but we can work this out. What would it take to get you back to handling the household management? Within reason, of course. It would take you hiring me as a professional employee with a written contract, fair wages, benefits, time off, and basic respect for the value of my work. Or it would take you recognizing me as an equal family member with my own needs and goals, which would mean significantly changing how this household operates. And if we can't do either of those things, then you'll continue to manage your household yourselves, and I'll continue to focus on rebuilding my health and my independence. Robert left my room without the confidence he'd entered with. His footsteps were slower, more thoughtful, as if he was finally beginning to understand that this situation wasn't going to resolve itself the way he'd expected. The next few days brought a parade of family members to my door, each trying different tactics to convince me to return to my former role. Jessica tried tears and manipulation, telling me I was ruining her senior year and her college prospects because she couldn't keep track of her responsibilities without my help. Tyler tried bargaining, offering to do some chores if I'd go back to managing everything else. Madison tried guilt, claiming that I was being mean and unfair by not helping her with things she couldn't do herself. But I held firm. Each conversation strengthened my resolve, because it showed me exactly how they viewed me and what they expected from our relationship. None of them asked about my health or my happiness. None of them expressed concern for my future or my goals. They only cared about getting their personal assistant back, so their lives could return to the comfortable routine they'd enjoyed at my expense. A month and a half after my collapse, Linda came to my room with a different energy entirely. She wasn't angry or desperate or manipulative. She looked defeated, exhausted, and possibly ready to have an honest conversation for the first time in years. Sarah, I need to tell you something, she said, sitting down heavily in my room's single chair. Robert and I have been talking, and we've made some decisions about how we're going to handle the household situation going forward. I saved my work and closed my laptop, giving her my full attention. We've decided to hire a professional cleaning service to come in twice a week. We've also enrolled the kids in after-school programs that include dinner, so we'll only need to manage breakfast and weekend meals. And we're implementing a chore schedule where everyone is responsible for their own laundry and basic room maintenance. These were significant changes, the kind of practical solutions they could have implemented years ago if they'd been willing to pay for services or require family members to be responsible for themselves. That sounds like a reasonable plan, I said. It's going to be expensive, Linda continued. Between the cleaning service, the after-school programs, and all the takeout we've been buying, we're spending almost $2,000 a month more than we used to. Money we didn't have to spend when you were handling everything. But now you'll have clean house and fed children without exploiting anyone's labor. Linda flinched at the word exploiting, but she didn't argue with it. The thing is, Sarah, even with all these changes, we're still struggling. Robert and I both work full-time, and there are still so many household management tasks that we don't know how to handle. Scheduling appointments, managing finances, organizing family activities, dealing with emergencies. I waited to see where this was leading. We'd like to offer you a real job, not as a family member helping out, but as a professional household manager. We'd pay you $4,000 a month, give you weekends off, and provide health insurance. You'd have your own schedule, your own responsibilities, and your own professional boundaries. $4,000 a month, health insurance, weekends off, professional boundaries. It was almost everything I'd said I wanted, offered by people who'd finally realized the true value of the work I'd been doing for free. That's a generous offer, I said carefully. But? Linda asked, apparently hearing the hesitation in my voice. But I don't think I can continue living and working in the same place where I was exploited for 15 years. Too much has happened. Too much damage has been done to our relationship for me to go back to managing your household, even under better terms. Linda's face fell. So what are you saying? That you're going to leave? I'm saying that I'm going to build my own life. I've been researching property management companies in Portland, and several of them are interested in hiring someone with my organizational skills and experience managing complex households. I've also been looking at apartments in different neighborhoods, places where I can start fresh without the history and baggage of our family dynamics. But where will you go? What will you do? I'm going to do what I should have done 15 years ago. I'm going to build a career, make my own money, create my own home, and live my own life. I'm 37 years old, Linda. I've wasted enough time being invisible in other people's stories. The conversation continued for another hour as Linda tried various arguments to convince me to stay. She promised things would be different, that they'd learn to value my contributions, that the family needed me. But I'd heard promises before, and I'd learned that people's fundamental attitudes toward me weren't likely to change just because they'd experienced some inconvenience. More importantly, I'd learned that I didn't want to be needed in the way they needed me. I didn't want to be the person who enabled other people to avoid responsibility for their own lives. I wanted to be valued for who I was, not just for what I could do for others. 3 months after my collapse, I moved out of the Henderson house for the final time. I'd found a job with Cascade Property Management, a growing company that specialized in high-end residential properties. My starting salary was $55,000 a year, with full benefits and opportunities for advancement. I'd also found a charming one-bedroom apartment in Southeast Portland, nothing fancy but entirely my own. The day I left, Linda stood in the driveway, watching me load my belongings into the moving truck I'd rented. Her house behind her looked clean and organized, evidence that the professional services and family chore system were working adequately. But she looked tired and older, as if the past few months had taught her exactly how much invisible work went into maintaining the lifestyle she'd taken for granted. "Are you sure about this?" she asked as I loaded the last box into the truck. "I'm sure. What if it doesn't work out? What if you need help or get sick again or can't find steady work? Then I'll figure it out, the same way millions of independent adults figure out their problems every day. I'll make mistakes and learn from them. I'll face challenges and overcome them. I'll build a life that belongs to me." Robert appeared in the doorway, still wearing his work clothes even though it was Saturday afternoon. He'd never quite adjusted to the new reality, where household crises might require his attention during his personal time. "Sarah, I want you to know that our door is always open if you change your mind," he said, though his tone lacked the conviction of someone who actually expected me to return. "I appreciate that," I replied, though we both knew I wouldn't be back. The kids came out to say goodbye, each of them looking slightly bewildered by the reality that I was actually leaving. Jessica, now managing her own college applications and room organization, seemed to have aged several years in the past few months. Tyler had learned to do his own laundry after ruining several expensive shirts by washing them improperly. Madison had become remarkably capable of keeping track of her own belongings once she realized no one else was going to find them for her. They were all more independent and responsible than they'd been when I was managing their lives for them. Losing their personal assistant had forced them to develop skills they should have learned years earlier. In many ways, my departure had been the best thing that could have happened to them, though none of them seemed to recognize it yet. I drove away from the Henderson house without looking back, my future spread out ahead of me like a road I'd never traveled before. For the first time in 15 years, I had no idea what my day would look like tomorrow, what challenges I'd face next week, or what opportunities might develop in the coming months. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. My new job at Cascade Property Management turned out to be everything I'd hoped for and more. My years of managing the Henderson household had given me skills that were incredibly valuable in the professional world. I could organize complex schedules, manage multiple properties efficiently, coordinate with contractors and service providers, and handle difficult clients with patience and professionalism. Within 6 months, I was promoted to senior property manager. Within a year, I was overseeing a portfolio of luxury properties worth over $50 million. My salary had increased to $75,000, and I was being considered for a partnership track that could lead to part ownership of the company. But the real satisfaction came from the respect I received in my professional environment. My colleagues valued my insights, my bosses appreciated my work, and my clients specifically requested me because of my reputation for excellence. I was finally being recognized for my capabilities rather than being taken for granted or dismissed. 2 years after leaving the Henderson house, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible during my years of servitude. I started my own property management company, specializing in luxury residential properties and estate management. My experience managing complex households, combined with the professional skills I'd developed at Cascade, made me uniquely qualified to serve high-end clients who needed comprehensive property services. I called my company Independence Property Solutions, a name that reflected both my personal journey and my commitment to helping clients achieve their own independence through professional property management. My first clients were referrals from Cascade, wealthy families who needed someone to manage their multiple properties, coordinate their household staff, and handle the complex logistics of maintaining luxury lifestyles. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was once again managing households and coordinating domestic services, but now I was doing it as a highly paid professional who was respected and valued for my expertise. The difference between being an exploited family member and being a sought-after professional was like the difference between slavery and freedom. My business grew rapidly through word-of-mouth referrals. Wealthy clients appreciated my attention to detail, my discretion, and my ability to handle complex situations without drama or crisis. I charged premium rates for my services, and clients paid them gladly because they understood the value of what I provided. Within 3 years, Independence Property Solutions was managing over 30 luxury properties throughout the Portland metro area. I had a staff of 12 employees, including housekeepers, groundskeepers, personal assistants, and administrative support. I was making over $200,000 a year, had excellent health insurance, and was building a substantial retirement fund. More importantly, I was respected. My clients treated me as a valuable professional partner. My employees looked up to me as a fair and supportive boss who paid well and treated people with dignity. My business peers recognized me as a successful entrepreneur who'd built something significant from nothing. The turning point came 4 years after I'd left the Henderson house. I was in my office reviewing quarterly financial reports when my assistant informed me that I had a potential new client consultation scheduled for that afternoon. The name on the appointment calendar made me pause. Linda Henderson. I almost canceled the meeting. The last thing I wanted was to deal with my former family's drama or get pulled back into their personal problems. But curiosity won out, and I decided to see what Linda wanted from me now. She arrived at my office looking nervous and uncertain, a far cry from the confident woman who'd spent 15 years giving me orders in her kitchen. My office was in a prestigious building downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and professional decor that spoke of success and stability. Linda looked around the space with obvious surprise, as if she'd expected to find me in some small, shabby office struggling to make ends meet. "Sarah, thank you for seeing me," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "I wasn't sure you'd agree to meet with me." "I have to admit I'm curious about what brings you here," I replied, maintaining the professional tone I used with all potential clients. "I need to hire a property management company," Linda said, her voice lacking the authority it had once carried when she made demands of me. "Robert and I are getting divorced, and I'm keeping the house, but I can't manage it on my own. I need someone professional to help me coordinate maintenance, manage the household staff, and handle the day-to-day logistics." Divorced. I wasn't entirely surprised, given the stress they'd been under since losing their unpaid household manager. Many marriages don't survive when couples are forced to actually deal with each other's personalities instead of focusing their energy on managing someone else's labor. "I see. And what kind of services are you looking for specifically?" Linda pulled out a piece of paper with a handwritten list, the kind of detailed organization I'd once provided for her family automatically. I need someone to coordinate with the cleaning service, manage landscaping and maintenance schedules, oversee any repair work, handle household finances and bill paying, and coordinate my calendar with household activities. I listened to her describe services that were remarkably similar to what I'd provided for her family for 15 years, except now she was prepared to pay professional rates for them. The full-circle nature of the situation wasn't lost on either of us. "Those are all services we provide," I said. "Our rates for comprehensive household management start at $4,000 per month, with additional charges for emergency services, large projects, and coordination with multiple service providers." Linda's face went pale at the figure, but she nodded. "That's what I expected it would cost. I've learned a lot about the value of professional household management over the past few years. Have you considered other property management companies? We're one of the more expensive options in Portland because we specialize in high-end properties and comprehensive services." "I called 3 other companies," Linda admitted. "But when I explained what I needed, they all recommended I contact you. They said you were the best in the city for complex household management situations. The best in the city." It was satisfying to hear, especially coming from someone who'd once dismissed my work as not constituting a real job. Linda was sitting in my office, prepared to pay me thousands of dollars for services I'd once provided to her family for free, because other professionals had recognized my expertise and recommended my company. "I can provide you with a detailed proposal and service agreement," I said, maintaining my professional demeanor. "But I should mention that we have a waiting list for new clients. We're quite selective about the properties we manage." "I understand. I'm hoping you'll consider taking me on because of our history. I know I haven't always treated you fairly, and this would be a chance for me to make that right." There it was. The closest thing to an apology I'd ever received from Linda, wrapped in a business request that would benefit her more than me. She wanted to hire me not because she'd learned to value my work, but because she'd learned she couldn't function without it and could no longer get it for free. "Linda, I appreciate your honesty about our history, but I need to be clear about something. If I take you on as a client, it will be purely a business relationship. I'll provide excellent professional services because that's what I do for all my clients. But we won't be family, and we won't have personal involvement beyond what's necessary for me to do my job effectively." "I understand," she said quickly. "That's exactly what I want. A professional relationship with clear boundaries." I spent the next hour walking Linda through my company's services, fee structure, and professional standards. She signed a contract that afternoon, agreeing to pay me more per month than she'd spent on my room and board during entire years when I'd lived in her house. The irony was perfect. Linda Henderson, who'd spent 15 years treating me like an unpaid servant while telling me my work had no real value, was now my employee. She was paying me premium rates for my expertise, and I was her boss, setting the terms of our relationship and the standards for our interactions. But the real satisfaction wasn't in the role reversal, though there was certainly justice in that. The real satisfaction was in the recognition of my worth. I'd built a successful business based on skills I'd developed while being exploited, and I was now respected throughout Portland as one of the best property managers in the city. 6 months into our professional relationship, Linda mentioned during one of our monthly status meetings that Jessica was struggling to find steady work after college. Tyler was living at home again, unable to manage his own apartment successfully. Madison was having trouble with organization and time management in high school. "They never learned to be independent," Linda said with a rueful smile. "I realize now that having you manage everything for them didn't prepare them for adult life. They're all struggling with basic life skills that other people their age take for granted." "Independence is a skill like any other," I replied. "It has to be practiced and developed over time. If someone always has their problems solved for them, they never learn to solve problems themselves. I wish I'd understood that 15 years ago. We all make mistakes. The important thing is learning from them and making different choices going forward." Our conversation was interrupted by my assistant, informing me that I had another client meeting scheduled. As Linda gathered her papers and prepared to leave, she paused at my office door. "Sarah, I know this is probably inappropriate to say in a business context, but I want you to know that I'm proud of what you've accomplished. You've built something really impressive here." "Thank you," I said simply. "I appreciate that. After she left, I sat in my office looking out at the Portland skyline, thinking about the journey that had brought me from that basement room to this corner office. It hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, financial struggles, and the challenge of building a business from scratch, while learning to value myself after years of being devalued. But every difficult moment had been worth it for this feeling of independence and self-respect. I was no longer invisible in my own life. I was no longer defined by what I could do for other people. I was Sarah Martinez, successful entrepreneur, respected professional, and someone who'd learned to value herself enough to demand the treatment she deserved. The Henderson family had taught me an important lesson, though probably not the one they'd intended. They'd shown me what happened when someone allowed themselves to be exploited, and they'd motivated me to ensure it never happened again. Their inability to function without me had revealed the true value of my work, and their current willingness to pay professional rates for my services had validated my worth in the marketplace. I was no longer the grateful family member accepting scraps and making excuses for poor treatment. I was the successful business owner providing valuable services to clients who appreciated my expertise. The woman who'd spent 15 years being told her work didn't matter was now running a company that other professionals recommended as the best in the city. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and proving that you were always worth more than people were willing to recognize. I'd spent 15 years being treated like a servant by people who couldn't survive without me. Now they were paying me professional rates to provide services they'd once gotten for free, and I was setting the terms of our relationship. The circle was complete, but more importantly, my real life had finally begun. 5 years into running Independence Property Solutions, I received a phone call that would prove just how far the wheel of fortune had turned. My receptionist, Maria, buzzed my office with barely contained amusement in her voice. "Sarah, I have Robert Henderson online too. He says it's urgent and concerns a potential employment opportunity." Robert Henderson. My former brother-in-law, who'd once treated me like an inconvenient piece of furniture, now calling my company seeking employment. I leaned back in my executive chair, looking out at the panoramic view of Portland from my corner office in the financial district, and smiled at the cosmic justice of the situation. "Put him through," I said, curious to hear what desperation had driven him to contact me. "Sarah, thank you for taking my call." Robert's voice came through the phone, and I could hear the strain beneath his attempt at professional courtesy. "I hope you're doing well. I've been hearing great things about your business around town. Thank you. What can I do for you, Robert?" There was a pause, and I could practically hear him swallowing his pride. "I'm calling because I'm looking for work, and I was hoping you might have a position available at your company. I've been having some financial difficulties since the divorce, and I heard you're one of the most successful property management firms in the city." Financial difficulties. The man who'd once lectured me about the value of hard work while I cleaned his house for free was now struggling to make ends meet. The irony was so perfect it was almost poetic. "What kind of position were you looking for?" I asked, maintaining my professional tone. "I was thinking maybe something in management or administration. I have extensive experience in banking and finance, and I understand you work with high-net-worth clients who might appreciate that background." Management. He wanted to skip entry-level positions and move straight into a role with authority and prestige, despite having no experience in property management or customer service. It was exactly the kind of entitlement I'd come to expect from him. "Robert, all our management positions require extensive experience in property management and proven success in client relations. Our entry-level positions start in maintenance coordination and basic administrative support." "Entry-level?" His voice rose slightly, betraying his surprise. "Sarah, I have 15 years of banking experience and an MBA. Surely that qualifies me for something more than entry-level work." "In banking, yes. In property management, it qualifies you to learn the industry from the ground up, just like everyone else." I kept my voice neutral, professional. "Our maintenance coordinators start at $16 an hour, with opportunities for advancement based on performance and demonstrated competency." $16 an hour. It was more than minimum wage, but it was also a fraction of what he'd been making as a bank manager, and we both knew it. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that I began to wonder if he'd hung up. "Would that position involve working under your supervision?" he asked, finally. "All positions at Independence Property Solutions ultimately report to me, yes, I'm the owner and CEO. Another long pause. The man who'd once snapped his fingers at me like I was a servant was now facing the reality that he might have to work under my authority, following my instructions and meeting my standards. The role reversal was so complete it was almost surreal. "I'll need some time to think about it," Robert said, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "Of course, take all the time you need. If you decide you're interested in joining our team, have your resume sent to our HR department and they'll schedule an interview." An interview. Robert Henderson, who'd never bothered to ask about my qualifications or career goals during 15 years of living in his house, would now have to convince my staff that he was worthy of employment at my company. After he hung up, I sat in my office reflecting on how dramatically our positions had shifted. I was now the successful business owner with the power to offer or deny employment. He was the struggling job seeker hoping for a chance to rebuild his career. The woman he'd once dismissed as unqualified for anything better than housework was now in a position to determine his professional future. 2 weeks later, Maria informed me that Robert had submitted his resume and completed the initial interview process. My HR manager, Janet, brought me his file for final review before making a hiring decision. "He's certainly qualified on paper," Janet said, spreading his resume across my desk. "MBA from Portland State, 15 years in banking, solid references from his previous positions. But he seemed surprised by our salary range and benefits package." "Surprised how?" "He kept asking about advancement opportunities and management track positions. When I explained that everyone starts at the entry level and works their way up based on performance, he seemed to think there might be exceptions for people with his educational background." I reviewed Robert's resume, noting the impressive credentials that had once intimidated me during my years as his unpaid household manager. Now, looking at his qualifications through the lens of my own success, I could see them for what they really were: relevant experience in a different industry that might or might not translate to success in property management. "What's your recommendation?" I asked Janet. "Honestly, I'm on the fence. His qualifications are good, but his attitude concerns me. He seems to expect special treatment based on his previous position and his connection to you. That kind of entitlement usually doesn't work well in our team environment." Janet was right. Independence Property Solutions had succeeded because we maintained high standards for professionalism, customer service, and teamwork. Employees who felt entitled to special treatment or advancement without earning it typically didn't last long in our competitive environment. "Set up a final interview," I decided. "I'll talk to him myself before we make a decision." The following week, Robert sat across from me in my office, wearing his best suit and carrying a leather portfolio that probably cost more than most of my employees made in a week. He looked around the space with obvious discomfort, taking in the evidence of my success and authority. "Thank you for considering me for a position with your company," he began, his voice carefully controlled. "I think my background in finance and client relations would be a valuable addition to your team." "Tell me why you're interested in property management," I said, leaning back in my chair. "It's quite a career change from banking." "Well, after the divorce, I've been reassessing my professional goals. Banking can be very stressful, and I'm looking for something with more work-life balance." He shifted in his chair, clearly rehearsing talking points he'd prepared. "Property management seems like a field where my organizational skills and attention to detail would be appreciated." Organizational skills and attention to detail. The same skills he'd dismissed as unimportant when I'd been using them to manage his household for 15 years. The same qualities he'd told me weren't real qualifications for real work. "What makes you think you'd be good at coordinating maintenance and handling client complaints?" I asked. "Those are the primary responsibilities of our entry-level positions. I'm confident I can learn whatever technical skills are required. I've always been good with people, and I understand the importance of customer service in any business." Good with people. I remembered his customer service skills from our years living in the same house. The way he'd barked orders at me, dismissed my concerns, and treated service providers like inconveniences to be endured rather than professionals to be respected. "Robert, I want to be completely transparent with you about what this position would involve," I said, pulling out a detailed job description. "Our maintenance coordinators work directly with contractors, handle emergency repair calls, coordinate with cleaning crews, and manage client complaints. It requires patience, diplomacy, and the ability to solve problems under pressure. The hours can be irregular, and you'll be on call for emergencies during rotating weekends. I watched his face as I described responsibilities that sounded remarkably similar to what I'd handled as his unpaid household manager, except now, they were being presented as legitimate professional duties worthy of compensation and respect. The position reports to our operations manager, who reports to our director of client services, who reports to me. There's a clear chain of command, and everyone is expected to follow proper procedures and maintain professional standards at all times. And advancement opportunities? Robert asked, clearly hoping to minimize the time he'd spend in an entry-level role. Advancement is based strictly on performance, client feedback, and demonstrated competency. Our most successful employees typically spend at least 2 years in maintenance coordination before being considered for senior positions. Some people advance faster, some take longer, and some find their niche at the entry level and choose to stay there. 2 years. I could see Robert calculating whether he could afford to work at $16 an hour for 2 years while rebuilding his career. The man who'd once made me beg for $1,500 a month while working 18-hour days was now facing the reality of earning entry-level wages while proving himself worthy of advancement. I understand this is a significant change from your previous career, I continued. If you're not comfortable with the position requirements or compensation structure, I completely understand. Property management isn't for everyone. Robert straightened in his chair, and I could see him mustering his resolve. No, I'm definitely interested. I think this could be a good opportunity for me to learn a new industry and contribute to your company's success. Excellent. Janet will get you set up with our training program and introduce you to your supervisor. Welcome to Independence Property Solutions. We shook hands across my desk, and I watched Robert try to process the surreal nature of our interaction. He was now my employee, subject to my company's policies and accountable to my management team. The power dynamic that had once favored him so completely had not just shifted, it had completely inverted. Robert's first few weeks at Independence Property Solutions were illuminating for both of us. My operations manager, Kevin, provided regular updates on his progress, and the reports painted a picture of someone struggling to adapt to an environment where his previous status and credentials meant nothing. He's having trouble with the service attitude, Kevin told me during one of our weekly staff meetings. Yesterday, a client called with a complaint about her landscaping crew, and instead of listening to her concerns and working toward a solution, he started explaining why her expectations were unreasonable. I had to step in and handle the call myself. This didn't surprise me. Robert had never learned to view service work as requiring skill or deserving respect. He'd spent years treating me like my concerns were unreasonable whenever I tried to address problems or suggest improvements to our household systems. He also seems frustrated by the emergency call rotation, Kevin continued. Last weekend, he had to coordinate an emergency plumbing repair at the Morrison property, and he complained to several team members about having his weekend interrupted for basic maintenance issues. Basic maintenance issues. Just like he'd once dismissed my health emergency as a minor inconvenience that was interrupting his important business meeting. Robert was discovering that in the service industry, client needs didn't conveniently limit themselves to standard business hours. How's his relationship with the contractors and service providers? I asked. That's been challenging too. He tends to be condescending when he's explaining client requirements, and he doesn't seem to understand that building good relationships with our vendor network is crucial for getting priority service and fair pricing. Of course he didn't understand that. Robert had never had to build relationships with service providers because I'd always handled those interactions. He'd never learned that treating people with respect and appreciation was not just morally right, but also practically beneficial for getting good results. Should we consider additional training, or is this a fundamental fit issue? I asked. Kevin considered the question carefully. I think it's partly a learning curve and partly an attitude problem. He's not used to being in a service role, and he's having trouble adjusting to the reality that our clients' satisfaction is our primary concern, even when their requests seem demanding or unreasonable. 3 months into Robert's employment, I received a call that brought the situation to a head. Mrs. Patterson, one of our most valuable clients, was extremely upset about an interaction she'd had with Robert during a routine property inspection. "Sarah, I've been working with your company for 2 years, and I've always been completely satisfied with your service," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "But yesterday's experience was unacceptable. Your employee was rude, dismissive, and completely unprofessional." I listened as she described Robert's behavior during a walkthrough of her vacation property. He'd apparently been impatient with her detailed instructions, dismissive of her concerns about minor maintenance issues, and condescending when she'd ask questions about the service schedule. "He actually told me that I was being too picky and that most property owners don't require this level of attention to detail," Mrs. Patterson continued. "Sarah, I'm paying your company significant money specifically because I want that level of attention to detail. If you can't provide it, I'll find someone who can." Mrs. Patterson was threatening to take her business elsewhere because Robert couldn't adjust his attitude to match our company's service standards. Her account was worth over $40,000 annually, and losing it because of one employee's poor performance was completely unacceptable. "Mrs. Patterson, I sincerely apologize for this experience. It doesn't reflect our company's values or service standards at all. Let me address this situation immediately and ensure it doesn't happen again." After apologizing profusely and assuring Mrs. Patterson that I would personally oversee her account going forward, I called Robert into my office for what I knew would be a difficult conversation. He entered with the slightly defensive posture of someone who suspected he was in trouble but wasn't sure why. "You wanted to see me?" "Yes, please have a seat. We need to discuss your performance, and specifically your interaction with Mrs. Patterson yesterday." Robert's face flushed slightly. "If this is about her complaints, I think she's being completely unreasonable. She wanted me to document every minor scuff mark and water stain in a house that's clearly lived in. That's not property management. That's obsessive micromanagement." "Robert, Mrs. Patterson is paying us to provide exactly the kind of detailed attention she's requesting. Our job is to give clients what they want, not to judge whether their expectations are reasonable by our personal standards." "But Sarah, you have to draw the line somewhere. If we cater to every unrealistic demand, we'll spend all our time on trivial details instead of focusing on real property management issues." I looked at this man who was lecturing me about customer service and professional standards, and felt a moment of genuine amazement at his lack of self-awareness. He was sitting in my office, working at my company, criticizing my business practices while failing to meet the basic requirements of his entry-level position. "Robert, let me be very clear about something. Mrs. Patterson's expectations are not unrealistic or unreasonable. They're exactly the kind of high standards that have made Independence Property Solutions successful. Our clients pay premium rates because they expect premium service, and that includes attention to details that might seem trivial to you. I understand that, but I'm not finished. Your attitude toward Mrs. Patterson and other clients has been consistently problematic. You're treating service requests like personal inconveniences instead of professional responsibilities. You're being condescending to people who are paying for our expertise, and you're damaging relationships that I've spent years building." Robert's defensive posture shifted to something more like panic as he realized this conversation was moving beyond general performance feedback towards something more serious. "Sarah, I know I'm still learning the industry, but I think my banking background gives me valuable perspective on client relations and business priorities. Your banking background is irrelevant here. What matters is your ability to provide excellent customer service, maintain professional relationships, and represent our company's values. So far, you've failed on all 3 counts." I pulled out his personnel file and spread the documentation of his performance issues across my desk. Client complaints, supervisor reports, and feedback from contractors who'd found him difficult to work with. "This is a formal performance review, Robert. Your employment with Independence Property Solutions is now on probationary status. You have 30 days to demonstrate significant improvement in your customer service, professional attitude, and team collaboration. If you can't meet our standards within that time frame, we'll have to terminate your employment." The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of our reversed roles. The man who'd once threatened to kick me out of his house if I didn't appreciate his generosity was now facing unemployment if he couldn't meet my professional standards. "I understand," Robert said quietly. "I'll do better. I just need some time to adjust to the service industry mindset." Time is exactly what you have. 30 days to prove you can function effectively in a customer service environment. I suggest you use it wisely. During the probationary period, Robert's performance showed some improvement, but it was clear that he was struggling with fundamental aspects of service work that came naturally to people who understood the value of treating others with respect. He could follow procedures and complete tasks adequately, but he couldn't genuinely embrace the service mindset that was essential for success in our industry. More troubling was the feedback I received from other employees. Several team members mentioned that Robert frequently complained about having to lower himself to coordinate with cleaning crews and maintenance workers. He'd made comments about this job being, quote, beneath someone with his education, and had expressed frustration that his previous management experience wasn't being recognized with faster advancement. The final incident came on day 28 of his probationary period. Robert was coordinating a large maintenance project at one of our most prestigious properties when he got into an argument with the painting contractor about scheduling and quality standards. The contractor, who'd worked with us successfully for 3 years, called our office to complain that Robert had been disrespectful and had questioned his professional competence in front of the property owner. I called Robert into my office the next morning with his termination paperwork already prepared. "Robert, we need to discuss yesterday's incident with the painting contractor at the Wellington estate. If this is about Martinez painting, they were completely out of line. They showed up 2 hours late and then had the nerve to argue with me about the timeline for completing the work. According to the contractor, you berated him in front of Mrs. Wellington and questioned his professionalism when he explained the technical requirements for properly preparing the surfaces before painting. Someone needed to hold him accountable for the delays." Mrs. Wellington was clearly frustrated with the lack of progress. "Mrs. Wellington called me personally to express her embarrassment about your behavior and to request that you never be assigned to her property again." I watched Robert's face cycle through emotions as he realized that his version of accountability had cost us another client relationship. "Robert, this isn't working. Your 30-day probationary period ends tomorrow, and your performance hasn't improved sufficiently to justify continued employment. We're going to have to let you go. Sarah, please, I can do better. I just need more time to adjust to your company's culture. You've had 3 months plus a 30-day probationary period. That's more time than we typically give employees who aren't meeting our standards. But I'm just starting to understand what you expect from me, and I really need this job. The divorce settlement was expensive, and I'm behind on my mortgage payments." Behind on his mortgage payments. The man who'd once lectured me about the value of hard work and financial responsibility was now struggling to meet his basic obligations. The irony was profound, but I felt no satisfaction in his financial difficulties. I just wanted him to understand that professional success required more than credentials and entitlement. "Robert, I'm sorry things haven't worked out, but Independence Property Solutions isn't the right fit for your skills and work style. I'm sure you'll find something more suited to your background. What am I supposed to do? I'm 52 years old, with a gap in my employment history, and a failed business relationship with my former sister-in-law. Who's going to hire me now?" The question hung in the air between us, highlighting the complete reversal of our circumstances. Robert was now the one facing uncertainty and financial insecurity, while I held the power to determine his professional future. "I'll provide a neutral reference focusing on your technical competencies and punctuality," I offered. "Your banking experience is valuable, and I'm sure there are positions where your skills would be better utilized." As Robert gathered his personal items and prepared to leave my company for the final time, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. 10 years ago, he'd been the successful bank manager living in his comfortable house while I cleaned his toilets for free. Now I was the successful business owner with a thriving company while he was unemployed and struggling financially. But the real lesson wasn't about revenge or role reversal. It was about the importance of recognizing value, treating people with respect, and understanding that everyone's work has dignity and worth. Robert had failed at Independence Property Solutions not because he lacked intelligence or education, but because he'd never learned to value service work or treat service providers as equals worthy of respect. 6 months later, I heard through Linda that Robert had eventually found work as a loan officer at a smaller bank, making significantly less money than he'd earned before his divorce. She also mentioned that he'd been forced to sell his house and move to a small apartment, a humbling experience for someone who'd once taken his prosperity and status for granted. As for Linda, she continued to be one of my most reliable clients, always paying her bills promptly and treating my staff with the kind of respect she'd never shown me during our years as family. The professional relationship worked well for both of us because it had clear boundaries and mutual respect built into its foundation. The Henderson family's story had become a cautionary tale that I sometimes shared with new employees about the importance of treating everyone with dignity, regardless of their position or circumstances. You never know when the person cleaning your house or coordinating your services might end up in a position to determine your own professional future. 10 years after leaving that basement room, I stood in my corner office looking out at the Portland skyline and feeling grateful for every challenge that had brought me to this point. Independence Property Solutions was now one of the most respected property management companies in the Pacific Northwest, with over 100 employees and offices in 3 cities. More importantly, I'd built a company culture based on the values I'd learned during my years of invisible service work. We paid fair wages, provided excellent benefits, treated all employees with respect, and recognized that every job, from entry-level maintenance coordination to executive leadership, contributed to our success. The woman who'd once been told her work had no value was now running a company that proved every day that service work, when done with skill and respect, was among the most valuable work in the world. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and proving that you are always worth more than people were willing to recognize. But even better than revenge is building something meaningful that creates opportunities for others to be valued and respected in ways that you never were. That's the real victory, and it's one that no one can ever take away from you. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.